Hey, everybody, really quickly before we get into today's stories. First and foremost, I just want to shout out all the narrators that came on and helped me with this and shared their stories. Make sure you go sub, like, do all that fun stuff for any of these narrators that you enjoyed. And also, there is one or two stories that I narrate on here that has some, I need to put a trigger warning on for some alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and suicide. So if you're not into those stories, there is timestamps. You can skip those. I believe that will be the last story, the very last story that I'll put on here. So if you don't want to listen to that, totally understood. Just want to give you a heads up. All right, I'm going to shut up now. Enjoy the stories. Happy Halloween, everybody. This took place a long time ago. I was 13 and my family had just moved to a small town. A new friend of mine from school and I made plans to go trick-or-treating together. At the time, I remember thinking I was a bit too old to still be trick-or-treating, but who doesn't want free candy? My friend and I figured we still had 1 year of trick-or-treating left in us. Because we were 13 and lived in a fairly safe neighborhood, my parents thought it was fine for us to trick-or-treat together without any adult supervision. Everything was going great and we were having fun, getting candy, you know. Then we rang on this one guy's doorbell. The porch light was on. There was a pumpkin or two. So we figured the people in the house were likely to be handing out candy. A middle-aged man opened up the door. At first, I was glad because he was dressed in costume and happy to see my friend and me. So I felt we were in for some top-tier candy. I don't even remember what candy he handed out, but I do remember what happened next. He asked us to enter his home, which is weird. We're 13. But we really didn't think anything of it. Then he asked if he could take our photo. He said he always likes to take pictures of the kids every Halloween because he loves seeing the costumes. On one of his walls were a bunch of pictures of different random unrelated children in Halloween costumes as well. At this point, even being a dumb 13-year-old, I was starting to get kind of creeped out. But I figured it was best to not upset the man. Let him take the picture and then we could leave. He snaps the photo of us, then pulls out a clipboard with a sheet of paper on it. A bunch of names written in childish handwriting. He says he likes the kids whose pics he snaps to sign their names so he can know who they are. Now at this point, we're both mega creeped out. We should have just run away, but we're too conditioned to not be rude. I decided to sign a fake name. He looked at the paper, then looked back up at me, then looked down at the paper. Then he repeated the fake name I'd given him, nodded. Luckily after that, he didn't do anything, and we were free to leave. But we were definitely creeped out. At the time, I thought he was just an eccentric guy. But as an adult looking back on this story, it seems much more sinister. I'm glad nothing actually bad happened to us, but I hope nothing bad happened to any other kids. Halloween with all these costume kids trick-or-treating in the dark, and with minimal supervision. It could be a great opportunity for predators to get alone with kids in their homes, with no one knowing the kids' whereabouts. Please stay safe out there, and happy Halloween. It was my turn to take the kids trick-or-treating. The previous year, it was my wife's, and we trade back and forth each year. My son and daughter were aged 7 and 9. Usually, I stay on the street while my kids go up to different houses to collect their candy. After about half an hour of walking around, we came to one of the more popular hotspots for candy collecting, a main street in the neighborhood. Lots of really cool decorations and animatronics on people's lawns. I became a bit distracted and stopped watching my kids as closely. At one point, they came back from a house, accompanied by another girl about the same height as my daughter. She was wearing a weird homemade mask, like a cardboard cutout or something. My daughter asked me if she could trick-or-treat with us, so I said sure. We all carried on together as a group. I didn't know who this girl was, but I figured she was a friend from school. As we continued, I start to notice a large man trailing us. He was wearing some sort of angry cat mask, and it was kind of creepy to be honest. I thought maybe he was the father of the girl, so I tried to start up some small chat with him. I said something like, "Nice weather, eh?" But he didn't respond. He just stood there staring at me while our kids went up the stairs to the next house. I tried again, asking, "Hey, is that your daughter?" He nodded, but didn't say anything else. I figured he just wasn't in the mood for chatting, so I just stopped trying. We carried on for about another 15 minutes until suddenly, my kids came up to me and said they wanted to go home. This surprised me. We hadn't been out for that long, and their bags were only maybe a third full. In any case, I just agreed, waved goodbye at the man in the cat mask and his daughter, and began our way back home. The weird thing is that when I glanced back, the man and his daughter were just standing there, staring at us. I checked one more time as we turned the corner, and they were just still standing there, not having moved at all. At this point, I decided to ask my kids, "So, who was that girl?" My daughter looked up at me with a confused look on her face. "She's your friend," my daughter replied. I asked her what she meant. Apparently, the girl with the cardboard mask approached them and said she was a friend of mine. She told my daughter that she was too shy to ask me if she could join us to trick or treat, and wanted my daughter to ask me instead. I laughed at this story and replied to my daughter, "Why would you think she was my friend? I don't have any children friends." What my daughter said next chilled my bones. According to her, when the girl with the cardboard mask approached them for the first time, she wasn't wearing the mask, so they were able to see her face. As it turns out, she wasn't a girl at all, but an older woman, maybe around my age, with wrinkles on her face. What's even more disturbing, the old woman had started to steal treats from my daughter's bag, apparently when I wasn't looking. This is why they asked me to go home. The old woman was creeping them out, and they just wanted to get away from her. I brought my kids home and told my wife about what happened. We made sure to check through all their candy, but didn't find anything suspicious or off. We didn't call the police or anything, since nothing really technically happened, but thinking back now, I kind of regret that decision. What the hell was that old woman doing, and who the hell was that man following us around? I don't think we'll ever know. Just think it's sick that there are people out there on Halloween, hiding behind masks and pretending to be children.
For context, as far back as I can remember, I've lived in haunted apartments. I would share what would happen at my house, and my friends at school would think I was just making up creepy stories. Anyways, I moved into this house in downtown Huntington Beach, California, in the middle of school with my grandma. Things were being moved, lights flickering, handprints on my mirror after a shower, and so much more. I have so many stories to share about my experiences, so let's get to the story. I had a close group of friends going into high school, with whom I'd share what was happening at my house. Of course, no one believed me, so naturally, I ended up keeping my experiences to myself. The only one who believed me was my best friend at the time, but every time I'd share, she would just get creeped out. Halloween night 2015, I invited my friends to do some light trick-or-treating and just hang out on my rooftop patio. Yeah, I know we were freshmen in high school, and we were too old. Anyway, after having a fun night going through the neighborhoods and downtown strip, we came back to my house to chill. My mother and grandma had left for LA to go to a Halloween party, so I had the house to myself. As we're hanging out, they brought up the ghost that is in my house. It seemed like they wanted to have spooky stories about him. FYI, a man died in our house from a brain aneurysm in the master bedroom. After a couple of stories, they began to laugh and poke harmless fun at him. I told them they shouldn't be saying that about him. Looking back at it, if someone told you, you should be scared. Our house has intercoms in every room and hallway, including the rooftop patio. Growing up in the house, I always suspected that he liked to use the intercoms, because wherever I was, the intercom would turn on and play telephone tag with me. Honestly, it instinctually popped into my head that he was probably listening because he loved parties. After giving an unintentionally eerie warning, I said I was going to go to the kitchen, which was on the first floor, to get more Dr. Pepper, and my friends instantly shot up from their chairs and wanted to come with me. I knew they were just scared. There's a door at the bottom of the spiral staircase to re-enter the laundry room, and once in there, there's another door that leads into the main part of the house. As we are approaching the first door, I go to twist the knob, and it was locked. The door was mostly glass, so looking through, all you can see is the darkness of the laundry room. Instantly, my friends freak out and ask me if my mum or grandma locked us out, but they hadn't been home in hours. They didn't believe me, so I FaceTimed my grandma, and of course, she was like, "There's no way we locked you out because we left before your friends got there." I wish you could see the looks on their faces. I explained to them how I warned them not to be making fun of the paranormal and asked them to say sorry and maybe Kent would let us in. They apologized quickly and the lock on the door unlocked. I go to open the door and it's still locked. I told them to make it sincere, and after they were pleading, the deadbolt unlocked. They still didn't learn their lesson. Now we're in the laundry room about to go through the door that leads into the main part of the house, and they start laughing and poking fun again. So here we go again. We hear the door lock up. They then start to panic. I told them to just learn their lesson and stop. More apologizing happens, and the door unlocks. Once the door was open, my friends quickly ran down the stairs by the front door and said they needed to leave. They never came over my house again. I've always felt pretty chill in paranormal encounters, so once I said my goodbyes, I talked out loud to Kent and started laughing because finally, they experienced something. I put on some horror movies on Netflix and ended up having a peaceful Halloween night. I'm not sure if they remember this night or if they trauma blocked it out, but it was a 10 out of 10. Moral of the story, respect the dead and maybe wait to make fun when you're not on the haunted property.
During the summer, on especially hot summer nights, I sleep with the screen door to the balcony open. I never really worried about it because it wasn't like I was living on the ground floor or anything. I lived on the 5th floor. I didn't worry about people looking in or thieves or anything like that. I guess the only person who could have broken in to steal stuff would have had to be Spider-Man. I felt at ease, sleeping, with only the boundary between me and the outside being the screen door. That has since changed. On the night that this incident took place, I came home late from work. I was absolutely exhausted. I had a quick microwavable dinner, and I headed to the bathroom to wash up for bed. The humidity was unreal that night, so I did the usual. I opened the balcony door and I closed the screen door. Now, I'm a heavy sleeper. I don't tend to get up all that much at night, but that night, I woke up in desperate need of water. I guess I didn't have time during the day to drink as much as I needed. It was still pitch black out, and that was a relief. I felt as if I had only been asleep for a couple of minutes. If it was time to go to work, I don't think I could have bared it. There was some faint light coming from outside. So instead of hitting the lights, I just groped for the bedside table and grabbed my cup of water. I sat up to drink, and that was when I noticed something. I looked out towards the balcony. I froze in bed as my eyes fell on a silhouette of a person. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was someone right there, on my balcony. I could tell they were looking right at me too. I lived alone at the time, and I didn't expect any guests in the dead of the night. Not even Spider-Man. I remember a jutting thought came to the forefront of my mind. This is my apartment. Why is someone on my balcony? The logical part of my brain had no answer to that question. I could tell from the silhouette that it was a man. It was dark. Really dark, but I could tell. I'm a woman, and I was living alone at the time. I was 25, I think, when this happened. The guy on the balcony was staring right at me. I wondered if what I was seeing was something paranormal for a brief moment. But as the clouds parted and the moonlight outside provided more light, I could tell that it was a very real person staring at me. Me and the intruder locked eyes, and I knew in that moment he wasn't a ghost or a figment of my tired mind. He was real, and he was there. The second I came to that realization, my body broke out in goosebumps. The hair on my neck stood on end. I know that sounds like such a cliche, but until something like this happens, you'll see how true that cliche is. Just as I felt the beginnings of a scream bloom in my chest, I saw the man on my balcony turn and run. I heard the intruder's footfall head off towards my neighbor's apartment. I didn't know what to do. I instantly thought of calling my mum. I thought of calling the police. I thought of running away. My head was in a spin. I heard a slam coming from the neighbors, and that was enough for me. It scared the hell out of me. I started to cry. I instantly called my mother. The first call should have been to the police, but I was in such a mess. I just needed to hear a familiar voice. I called the police, and they came out pretty quickly to inspect the scene. They found that my air conditioning unit had a clear shoe print on it. That made sense, as the aircon unit was right next to the partition between my place and my neighbor's. I guessed that whoever was on the balcony used it as a kind of step to get in and get out. There was only one person that the officer wanted to speak to that night, my neighbor. I didn't know him. I mean, I knew he lived there, but I hadn't ran into him in the few months since I moved in. To cut a long story short, it was him. I didn't get much out of the police in terms of a reason or an explanation as to what he was doing on my balcony in the dead of night, but trust me, my mind has conjured up enough theories. I am so glad I woke up when I did. Maybe he realized that I was regularly sleeping with the screen door as a barrier to the outside. Maybe he had planned whatever he had planned to take place that night. Sometimes I wonder what the hell he had in store for me that night. I tortured myself with so many possibilities that I couldn't stand to sleep alone. I moved out. Humans are way more scarier than anything paranormal.
In the summer of 2004, my family was supposed to vacation in Kennebunkport, Maine. I was about 14 at the time. My father was stuck in business meetings, so he would be coming up from Manhattan a few days after us. My mom wanted to drive up, which was super annoying to me at the time, but we didn't have a choice, and my brother, sister, and I loaded into the car and began the drive. The drive there was uneventful, but there were various delays, and we ended up arriving a lot later than we originally planned. Because of this, the owners of the house we were renting had turned in for the night, and we weren't able to get a hold of them to get the keys. It sounds like horrible planning, but apparently they were very strict about the time frame to come pick up the keys. My mom, unfazed, decided that she wanted lobster, so we went to one of our two favorite spots. While we were eating, she called up my dad to see if he could make us reservations at a nearby hotel. While we were enjoying the lobster, a guy came up and started chatting with my mom. I figured it was just a friendly local making conversation. During this, my dad calls my mom, and my mom excuses herself to speak with him. Apparently all the hotels were booked for the night. Go figure. It was the height of vacation season in Kennebunkport. The plan was for us to drive to the next nearest town, just to find somewhere to stay, until we could pick up the keys for our vacation home. Apparently the local had been listening to my mom's conversation, and came back over once she got off the phone. There was nothing outwardly strange about him. He was clean-cut, unassuming, and fit in with the clientele. He told my mom that he had a big home, with a guest house, where we were more than welcome to stay, and his wife wouldn't mind. Immediately my reaction was, F that. No way in the world was I staying at a random guy's house in creepy Maine in the dark. No offense to anyone living in Maine, but the streets get creepy and dark at night. The guy said that he was in finance. My mom was an investment banker, and they chatted enough for my mom to determine that he wasn't totally full of it. I call my dad hysterical, and he said that I was overreacting, and that I needed to get out of the city more often, and accept that sometimes people are just nice. So my mom, brother, sister, and I got into our car and followed him back to his house. The guest house was very nice, fully furnished, and had 2 bedrooms, but the beds were located right under the window in each room. It just seemed out of place to me. Fast forward to later that night. We were all getting ready to go to bed. My mom hears a knock on the door, and it's the guy. He said he just wanted to check to make sure that we got settled in, which is a nice thing to do. But 30 minutes later, he comes back to check in again. At this point, my mom said, thanks, we're good. Thanks, we're good. We'll stop off tomorrow morning and drop off the keys. Fast forward again, 30 to 45 minutes later. I couldn't sleep, and apparently nobody else could either. We then heard rustling from outside, which was odd, because the guest house was nowhere near trees or in close proximity to bushes that might cause such a noise. At this point, I see my mom wide awake and looking at the window. Let me add that none of these windows had curtains or any kind of covering. The guy said it was because his wife was in the process of redecorating. When I looked, there was a figure just standing there. I thought it was going to have a heart attack. I don't know how long he had been there for. When the figure walked away, my mom waited for a bit and then told us to get our stuff together. She wasn't messing around. We had my dad on the phone at this point, and he was pretty much flipping out on my mom. She said that she was going to put stuff in the car and to follow her out. I would say this was around 2 a.m. When we got into the car, we pulled around to the front of the main house so my mom could return the key. When we got to the front, all the lights were off. It looked like no one had been home. Everything was black. Also, the 2 cars that had been there were now gone. After seeing this, my mom became pretty unsettled and said we were leaving and proceeded to drive to the gate. The gate at the end of the driveway had been deadbolted and padlocked shut. It wasn't a super strong gate, so my dad said to rev it and to just get out of there. We were in a big SUV. We drove straight back to New York City, not speaking the entire time. We have never returned back to Maine since, and my parents refused to speak about this. But one night my drunk cousin told me something. Apparently he had overheard a conversation they were having about this. He said, "They didn't tell you? The owners of that house were on vacation." I'm assuming that my mom or dad followed up with the local authorities and figured that out, but they never told us. I don't know who that man was or what he was planning on doing, but I'm curious to know if there were any known serial killers or murderers who lived in or were traveling through that area at the time. I eventually spoke to my parents about what happened that night. They didn't have a ton of details for me, and frankly didn't want to talk about it. My mom first apologized to me because she knows it was a shitty situation and still thinks she's a horrible mother. She's not, by the way. She's awesome. I asked her what made her suspect something was wrong, or what made her put her guard up. Essentially, she said that it was dark, and the longer the night went on for, the more it sunk in that it wasn't a great idea for us to be staying here, and she should have never agreed to it. However, the tipping point was when the guy came by, the second time. His demeanor had done a 180. She felt there was something off about him. She described it as somewhat of an edge, in both his attitude and tone of voice. He seemed to be anxious and annoyed, but was trying to come across as a concerned host. He also kept looking back to the main house during the conversation and wasn't really paying attention to her when she said that everything was fine. All of those signs put together made her realize that something wasn't quite right here. It was like there was something hidden beneath his exterior that was coming out, and when she caught a glimpse of it, she didn't like it. When my mom pulled up to the house, at first she was just happy we found a place to settle in for the night after a long drive, so she wasn't paying attention to everything as she should have been. But when we left the place, she was a bit more aware. The first thing she noticed was that the main house was undergoing renovations, which might explain why it was unoccupied. The exterior looked kind of incomplete, and that didn't jive with what our host had told her initially. Neither she nor my father called the cops. She said in hindsight they probably should have, but she was primarily concerned with getting out of there, especially after breaking through the entry gate with the SUV. It wasn't until some time passed that she realized that she probably should have alerted the authorities. I don't remember this next point, but apparently the house was a lot further away than she was led to believe. This makes me think that it was not in the main part of town. I'm not great with geography, and my mom doesn't remember exactly where it was. She said she was focused on following him, and wasn't really paying attention to the street names. Plus, it was dark. In regards to what my drunk cousin told me about the owners being on vacation, my dad said that he was a drunk. I mean, sure, but I pressed him on this a bit. Apparently how my cousin came up with that idea is because when my aunt and uncle were talking with my parents about it one night, I guess someone floated the idea that perhaps the owners were on vacation and this person was house-sitting for them. However, my parents both believed that the house was either being renovated or the owners weren't there for whatever reason. I'm not sure if these answers really answer anything, and frankly, they make me feel worse about the whole situation than I did before. I think my parents felt horrible and extremely guilty, and still do, and tried to just bury this and move on.
For 3 summers, I worked in an old county hospital that my buddy's uncle owned. It was without a doubt the worst time of my life, as I today worked completely alone until around the end of my time there. There's plenty of history between this building and I, which if it interests people enough, I'll divulge, but I want to focus on a specific story. Prior to my employment there, we spent 2 nights in this building. This will cover the second night. It was my buddy. Names have been changed for privacy reasons. We'll call him Chris, and my brother Luke and I. We brought a video camera with us, and we rode ATVs around the property for most of the day before entering the building. Once we were in the building, we set up our base camp on the 3rd floor in a day room. Basically just an open space where the people could hang out, like a common area. The 3rd floor was a medical ward, which housed a hospital unit, at one of the thickest doors I've ever personally seen. At least 4 inches thick, with only deadbolts to open and close it, along with the observation windows and a nurse's station for just that room. Gives me chills just thinking about it. Anyway, we set up camp and then worked our way through the building, filming as we go. We worked our way through the building in about 2.5 to maybe 3 hours, and it was around 10:30 to 11 by the time. We ended up getting back to base. It was about then that we heard a tapping noise, like metal opening and closing. On a calm, windless night, it didn't seem like this was possible, but we wrote it off as maybe just a wind trap in the nurse's station. We gathered sleeping bags and our sodas and chat before Luke looked at us and said, "Guys, I can't do this. I'm really uneasy and I just want to go." Well, Chris and I were like, "Okay, that's fine. We'll just go ahead and escort you down to the car and you'll be safe there." We go ahead and escort him down. get greeted by the German Shepherd on guard duty, and then we head back up. We get up and settle in. Chris can fall asleep anywhere instantly, something that he said was a hell of a skill once he joined the army, but it's important as I couldn't sleep at all. I could hear the pup wandering around outside before he laid down outside the window. It was a clear, calm night. We could hear his nails on the cement, all the way on the 3rd floor. Then suddenly he got up and started growling and barking. My heart has never, ever beat that fast. I slowly got up and peered out the window down, and I could see the pup looking back, up at me, growling. Talk about a heart-stopping moment. I kicked Chris and told him what was happening, and he said that it was normal to just go back to bed. Cool, here I was thinking that maybe we might just get killed. I took a few breaths and then crawled back into my sleeping bag and tried to settle in. I was down for what felt like no more than 10 minutes when I sort of woke up. I checked my phone and it was about 12:30-ish when I heard the most gut-wrenching sound of my life. Something I will never be able to explain or forget. A loud, unending scream that didn't echo. I would have written it off as just an animal, but midway through, whatever it was screamed, "Oh fuck, please stop." Then as it quickly started, it ended. I could feel my fingers trembling, but white-knuckled around my knife. I barely managed to call out to Chris, who didn't respond. I so badly wanted to leave, but couldn't force myself to move. I swear I didn't sleep, but eventually daylight broke, and I was up and packing immediately. I woke up Chris and we went down to the car. I asked Chris about it, and he said that he hadn't heard anything, but Luke had just as weird of a night. He said he could see shadows moving in the surrounding areas of the building, but every time he turned the car lights on to check, they were gone. He said it happened multiple times, but he just closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Needless to say, I have absolutely no clue as to why I decided to work there after all of this. But if you'd like to hear more of these creepy/scary moments from my time here, let me know.
This happened when I was still a new hire at the company I still work for. At the time, there weren't many job opportunities in the town I lived in, not for the field I wanted work in at least. So, when I saw a posting for the job I wanted, with the only drawback being that I relocate, I jumped at the chance. I didn't have much going on for me in my hometown anyways. Most of my friends had moved away after their studies and I didn't have a girlfriend or anything like that. But although I was already considering moving to another town, my plan was to move to a bigger city, not to a comparable small town. I applied anyway, thinking that I should at least try as it was the field I wanted to work in. I ended up getting the job and moved across the country, 2 prefectures over, about 2 hours by car. The move was easy as I didn't have much to move, and the company organized my initial apartment for me with the option to find my own place once the apartment's contract was up. I just moved in, and after spending the day unpacking and putting things away in my new home, it had gotten really late. I still hadn't had a chance to go food shopping yet, and being a more countryside town, most supermarkets were closed already. There was a drugstore about a 10 to 15 minute drive away, but I didn't really feel like driving, so I decided to walk to the nearby convenience store. It was 24 hours, and would definitely have a good selection of food and drinks for my first night's meal.
It was only a 10-minute walk, and I felt it would be nice to get a feel for my new neighborhood. The night was cool. It was late fall after all, but it felt crisp and refreshing to be out of the apartment. I walked for a couple of blocks before I saw the convenience stores glow. The neighborhood was dark at night, so the store's glow was a comforting sight. I walked a couple of more minutes, and I was there. I entered the store and was greeted by the store's sole employee for the night. The store was nearly empty, save for a few scattered customers and the lone cashier. I took my time picking up some snacks, a bento, and a couple of beers to celebrate. I gradually became aware that I was now the only customer. There was nothing unusual about that, but for some reason, I started to get a real feeling of unease. The quietness of the store was odd, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerators, and the lighting seemed darker for some reason. I tried to dismiss my feeling I was just being overtired due to my day and got on with what I was doing. I decided to grab some food for breakfast the next day as well and continued my shop. As I turned down the aisle containing bread, a shadowy figure caught my eye. It was a tall, indistinct silhouette, lurking just at the edge of the store towards the back in a darker corner that led to the restrooms. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the dim lighting, or perhaps a shadow cast from outside. But then it moved, darting from the corner, then to a window, with an eerie fluidity that sent a shiver down my spine. I blinked, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me, but the shadow persisted, hovering ominously, now just outside the store. It seemed to be watching me, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Since it seemed to be outside, I was in no hurry to get to where it was, so I continued my shop, all the while keeping an eye on the shadow outside. Just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. I pretended to shop closer to the window so I could check for it, and it was definitely gone. A shiver once again ran up my spine, and I felt the strong urge to leave and get home as soon as possible. I quickly paid for my items and mumbled a hurried farewell to the cashier, while still darting my gaze all around the store and outside. Stepping back out into the crisp night, I felt an overwhelming urge to get as far away from the convenience store as possible. Then, I noticed the shadowy figure continued to follow me, keeping pace with my every step. Panic gnawed at my insides as I walked briskly through the dimly lit streets, the chilling presence never relenting. After I got a block or so away from the convenience store, however, I could no longer see or feel the shadow's presence. I rushed home after that, continuously checking over my shoulder the whole way. I went to that convenience store plenty of times after that while I lived there, but always made sure to never go back after dark.
This happened when I was about 10 or 11, so we're going back to about 2006 or 2007. It was Halloween night, and it was the first time my parents were letting me go trick-or-treating alone with my friends, without an adult. Keep in mind, this was a very small town that I was born into and grew up in, and it was the type of community where adults would look out for everyone's children, not just their own. So, there were adults present around us the entire night. Just not any trailing my particular group of 3, me and my 2 best friends. The night had gone without a hitch. We picked a few streets in the small town to go up and down to collect our candy in our empty pillowcases. It was probably around 7 in the evening, just before our 8:30 curfew. We went down one of the less populated streets, where there was a few houses shaped like domes. Think Patrick's Rock from SpongeBob, only a lot more glass. I hadn't really gone down that street too many times before, and I didn't know anybody who lived there, but we made our merry way down there in hopes of some Reese's or Kit Kats. We quickly came to realize that most of the houses were dark, and when a house is dark on Halloween, it's telling you not to knock. However, one of the dome houses was lit up, so we walked up to it and prepared ourselves for some more sugar. When the door opened, a man answered. He was at least in his 40s, definitely middle-aged. It's hard to figure out how old someone is when it's a memory from an 11-year-old. I knew he wasn't a father of any of the kids that I knew, but he seemed friendly enough. He invited us inside for candy, and because we were raised in such a bubble of a town, we obliged. Luckily, we weren't met with death or impending danger. Instead, we were met with a Polaroid camera. The man told us he wanted to take a picture of our Halloween costumes for the local newspaper, and he motioned to the left of us, where a corkboard of Polaroids sat, displaying at least a dozen photographs of kids from the neighborhood, cheesing at the camera in their costume. So again, we stupidly obliged. I remember feeling a little uneasy, but after the photo, he gave us candy and we were on our way home. When I told my mom about it later that night, she was of course horrified. She called up the other moms, and the three of us got a nice long lecture on stranger danger, something we had previously been taught but ignored. We scoured the local paper and the surrounding town papers for photos of the town's kids in Halloween costumes, but we never found any. I didn't feel as if he was capable of actually hurting us, but I do count myself lucky that nothing bad happened.
The Kitchen Ghost, written by Kitten with Demittens, and narrated by Lady Spookaria. I bought an old house that needed renovations. The previous owner was the adult daughter of an elderly lady who died in the house, and she didn't want to deal with her mother's belongings or the cleanup. I've never been squeamish about dealing with other people's property. At one point, you could tell she took a lot of care of her home, but just got overwhelmed with all the cleaning and maintenance. The elderly lady died at the wooden kitchen nook. I've always felt watched when I was inside the kitchen, but it was never a malicious feeling. Imagine a country-style 1950s-style home, and I wanted to keep the overall style and vibe, but make sure I had everything up to date. I like my fancy appliances. I kept the old furniture, took it outside, and treated it with wood finisher to keep it looking nice. The more work I did on the house, the more active the ghost became. I woke up and wandered into the kitchen at night time to get a cup of tea, when I saw a little old lady standing at the stove. She was barely 5 feet tall, hunched over, with grey hair, and she was semi-transparent. I gasped when I saw her, and she disappeared. It felt uncomfortably cold where she had been standing, and I felt uneasy while I turned on the kettle. The water boiled, and I looked around the empty, quiet kitchen. She got more active the more renovations were done. I kept and fixed up a lot of her belongings. In one of the kitchen units I found photo albums, letters from loved ones, and the random things she liked. I couldn't keep everything. I messaged her daughter and asked if she wanted any of the personal effects. She hesitated, asked if it would be too much trouble, and then made the drive down. She cried when she saw the new version of the place, and I showed her around. Since she had a long drive home, I asked her if she wanted a cup of tea and a chat. I wanted to know more, and maybe even give the ghost mom a chance to speak to her daughter. She told me about the memories of her mother. The ghost didn't speak or do anything while she was there. It felt like, almost, when she left, that the ghost and even the house had changed toward me. I felt like the ghost welcomed me into the home, almost happy I was there. Now, everything was freezing cold. Not the brief chills I would occasionally get from being in certain places. The worst and the most noticeable place was the kitchen, and especially at the kitchen nook. I stopped using it altogether. It used to be a bright and happy home. I contacted a medium to try to speak with her, so I could find out what I did wrong, and if there was anything I could do to help. The medium walked around the house, and told me the ghost was in the kitchen. I already knew this. The ghost didn't want to speak to her. The medium told me the ghost wasn't happy with her daughter and was angry she was in the house. I asked why. She didn't say. I felt like I didn't belong in the house anymore, that it wasn't mine, that I was a stranger and I was trespassing. The uneasy feeling spread to every part of the house, and I started to see her standing at the end of my bed, angry at me. She never said anything. I didn't know what to do, and it went on for months before I decided to speak to someone. I was exhausted, and a shadow of my former self. No energy, and I stopped being who I was. I spoke to a group about a possible exorcism, and they said they needed to do an investigation. It turns out the daughter was abusive towards her mother, and was constantly trying to steal her money or the house from under her. I didn't get that impression from her. All I saw was a loving and sad daughter who couldn't stand to be in the home. Either way, I already bought the house and need to be able to live here comfortably. One night, when the spirit appeared at the end of my bed, I told her I wasn't her daughter and wanted things to go back to the way they were. She didn't stop. The next night I tried it again. It didn't work. I messaged the daughter and tried to discover what the backstory actually was. She thanked me again for giving her the personal effects and repeatedly told me how grateful she was. I thought the ghost was perhaps overreacting to things and needed to move on from what happened. Then she asked if I had found any valuables. This was the first time she had ever asked something like this. I told her I hadn't. The daughter mentioned her mother keeping things from her in the past and how she wanted what she was owed, things that I now owed her. I told her I bought the house as is, with all the possessions inside, and I technically didn't need to send or give her anything. She started saying that she was going to take the house back and get everything in the house. I blocked her, and I understand her mother's anger now. I apologized out loud in the empty house, and the ghost of the elderly woman seemed to be satisfied with that. She didn't appear at the end of my bed anymore, and the house lost the horrible chill it had. I was able to rest and relax. I never saw her ghost again, and it lost the warmth it had when I first moved in. It was sad. I missed her, but figured this was the next best option. Every so often, I have a feeling she's watching me from the kitchen nook, and I say good morning to her.
Years ago, I lived in a small southwest middle-of-nowhere town. Senior year of high school, one of my friends had been dating a boy that attended the local university. They'd been together since before he graduated our high school the year prior. His fraternity was throwing a Halloween house party, and we were invited. Quick, in an effort not to get confusing, Zoe and Sarah are my friends. Zoe is dating the frat boy, Anton. Okay. Halloween falls on a Saturday that year, so Sarah, Zoe, and we've spent all day together, finding some revealing costumes, doing our hair and makeup in the bathroom mirrors for hours. And at that moment in time, I can say that it was all in hopes to catch the attention of a popular Phi Zeta Kappa boy. Our hopes fell short on arrival, as it looked like the party had already been raging for hours. The sun hadn't even set yet when we pulled up. The house was packed with drunk college kids, the volume of talking only in competition with the music playing from speakers strategically placed around the house. Stepping through the doorway, it felt like I entered another world, populated with creatures speaking with a sloppy, mashed dialect, resembling English, but far too unintelligible for meaning to be derived. Zoe takes the lead and starts pushing her way through the crowd, looking for Anton. As fate were to have it, it doesn't take long to spot him. Just above the heads of the faceless crowd, two hairy legs are hoisted above the masses. Someone is taking a cake stand in the kitchen. And we immediately recognize the beat-up Converse brushing against the ceiling. A few more solid shoves and we break our way through the traffic of bodies into the kitchen area. Just as we do, Anton is sucking on the cake spout as two of his friends hold his legs and cheer him on. When Anton gets down, he stumbles over and hugs onto Zoe. and then, like clockwork, he throws up down her back. As the warm liquid splashes in her hair and on the floor behind her, I can see Zoe's eyes fill up with tears. Two of Anton's friends help them down to the washroom downstairs. Zoe locks the two of them in there, and she spends the rest of the night trying to clean Anton in the shower and clean herself. Now, it's just Sarah and I in this chaotic atmosphere of strangers. Sarah's a good extrovert to have around, though. She didn't let Anton's party foul delegate the evening. Immediately, she starts chatting up these two handsome but very intoxicated guys. They offer us some mixed drinks. Sarah sips on hers, but as I'm about to put the straw in my mouth, a big, shirtless guy, he snatches the drink out of my hand and he downs it, and just as he finishes, he does a big Ric Flair woo. The two guys we were talking to get pissed and start yelling at this guy. It totally killed the vibe, watching these two men revert to cavemen as they puffed their chest and shouted at this guy. I decided to excuse myself to the restroom. Since Zoe and Anton are occupying the downstairs bathroom, I had to walk up to the second floor. At the top of the stairs, I could see the upstairs was pretty empty. The upstairs is pretty much just a long hallway with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. At the end of the hallway is the bathroom. The door was open and the light is on. A green light for me to hightail it in there for a moment away from the party beneath. I walk in and I'm nearly startled off of my feet. Just standing in there, looking down at the floor, I see the same guy who had stolen my drink minutes before. He looks up at me, confused, and he says something like,
"What just happened?"
I'm like, "Oops, sorry," and I slam the door shut. I'm still stone cold sober, and now a bit terrified that this guy made it up the stairs and past me without detection. Seconds before I started walking upstairs, he was getting shoved around by 2 guys in the kitchen. This is where all of these years later, I still don't know how to concisely explain the next events that followed. So, big guy's in the upstairs bathroom. I turn and I walk downstairs, and people are filing out of the house like rats in a drain. Looking off the stair banister, I can see into the kitchen. A group of people are standing, clustered in a circle. Making my way back in past the dwindling crowd, I see that the small cluster of people are circled around a body lying motionless on the floor. Upon closer inspection, I realize that it's the big guy on the ground. I'm in disbelief. I spin around and I run back up the stairs. I open the bathroom door. It's now empty. I run back downstairs, and the few people still in the house are still around the body. Minutes later, paramedics file in and they can't resuscitate him. He's thrown onto a gurney and wheeled out to an ambulance. The house becomes quiet, and the ones still there begin to start slowly picking up cups and streamers. The shock of it all threw us into some strange autopilot, and we all began to clean the house. I go downstairs to check on Zoe and Anton. They've fallen asleep in a pile of towels on the washroom floor together. Then, I realize I haven't seen Sarah in the midst of all this. I comb through the house with no luck. I end up going outside and I find her sleeping in her car. The doors are locked and I have to pound on the window to wake her up. I hadn't drank that night, so I ended up driving us both home. The next day, we went back to Zoe and we found out what really happened to the big guy. Apparently, and this was originally from Big Guy's little brother's friends, but apparently he had died from a toxic overdose of GHB. The 2 gentlemen attempting to feed us drinks, they'd also tried to spike our drinks, but they were obviously too drunk and dosed the cups with far too much. Sarah said When she lost track of me, she started to feel really woozy, so she went outside and locked herself in the car. Luckily, she'd only taken the one drink before the whole scene abrupted. It was a very smart move on her part, going to the car. I don't want to imagine what would have happened if she stayed there, or worse, finished her drink. Technically, we, or at least I, owe my life to that big guy, the one who stole my drink. I hope in the afterlife he knows how grateful I am.
My husband Jim and I own an antique business in a big, old, bizarre barn of a building. It's 5 floors. Multiple other tenants, and there's even a restaurant in there too. Halloween was on a Monday last year. We locked up the business at 5 p.m. and we went to an early dinner across town. Then we got a call from SHOUTOUT, that's our security monitoring company, at 6:30. A motion detect on the lower level. Then we got another. We left in a tearing hurry, but figured it was probably just a bird or rat. We don't have rats, but, something. Maybe a cat. It's way too early for a break-in, after all. I went inside the main level upstairs and disarmed the alarm and started fumbling noisily with the keys and the big iron gate, one of many that separate the floors at night. Jim checked the perimeter outside for signs of a break-in and saw nothing. The doors and the windows were all intact. Definitely, absolutely a bird, or a rat, or a cat. I'm accustomed to the building after dark, so I just turned on my phone light, not the overheads, and I walked around boldly like I owned the place. I looked in the corner with the motion detector. Nothing. Just its red eye blinking mindlessly at me. No rats, no cats, no birds. I turned and went the other way while Jim poked around a few aisles over. And there it was. A fucking burglary kit sitting in the middle of the floor. Bolt cutters, a fire extinguisher, they were just sitting there, waiting. I've never gotten a bigger case of sheer terror so fast. After all, there were no broken windows or doors. So he was still there, in the dark, with me. I hissed, Jim, please. And he didn't hear me. I literally couldn't scream. Just like in those stupid goddamn dreams, my voice was stuck. Just me, the spotlit burglary tools, and a hostile presence lurking in the dusty shadows, watching while I whispered for someone to save me. Finally, 1,000 years, or maybe just 10 seconds later, Jim wondered why I had taken root in the hallway and came to see. He saw that I was frozen at that point and was like, oh fuck. We bolted out the front door to call 911 and to wait, and we abandoned the building to the burglar. An eternal 5 minutes later, the police showed up and were initially pretty unimpressed with our find of the crowbar and the fire extinguisher, until we pulled up the security footage that revealed the actual horror, the face of my new sleep paralysis demon. So, this guy, as is obvious, he's built like a lean, mean brick shithouse. He'd crouched on a landing behind a bookcase when we closed, and watched me and my staff lock up. He bided his time, and then calm as could be, he walked out and went to the men's restroom in the hallway downstairs. That area isn't set for motion detect for a variety of reasons. He spent a while in there, moving around with the door open. He constructed a mask using one of ours and a fake flower wreath to hold it on, purple plastic clematis. He looked right into our camera, barefaced, and then put the mask on. He stared at it and he fixed his mask for a time and finally pulled his gloves on. He stacked a few solid body vintage suitcases in front of a tall iron gate and he hopped right over like it was nothing. He ran down the hall, which triggered the 6:30 silent alarm, and looped the floor. He ran back into the hall and moved a ladder to hop back to the other side of the gate and, bizarrely, just repeated this whole cycle a few more times. Then he went to the basement. He wormed over a 15-inch gap over yet another iron gate. Back to the hall again. He stared into the camera some more. He repeated this. He was moving fast, Up and over, back and forth, upstairs and downstairs, almost parkour style. Then he got the tools out and peeled apart one of our steel lock boxes with the crowbar and stole a handful of our keys to access showcases. At this point, he heard me fumbling with the gate and keys upstairs. He ditched the stolen keys and tools and hid, watching me while he waited in the dark. We exited to call 911, and he ran back to the basement. In the basement, there's access to a dirt tunnel that circles the perimeter of the building. He broke the door open and he entered. Spiders the size of dinner plates live in there. He had no light. It's muddy and dank. In a word, petrifying. There's a tiny exit hatch. If you walk the whole thing and take the multiple turns, that dumps you into the busy kitchen of a restaurant, whereupon one would need to stroll past the line cooks out into the restaurant proper, which has cameras, and then one could leave their front door. Plastered with mud, which does leave tracks, speaking from experience. When we found it, there was his clear entrance into the tunnel, but no exit tracks, no muddy footprints, nobody walking out on the restaurant cameras, and the cooks didn't notice anything. It was a busy night, though. Reviewing the footage and timing the whole thing, tracing his path from camera to camera, and searching the building carefully took hours. By the end, all of us, including the police, were starting to lose our collective cool and freak out. There was no chill when even the guys with guns were rattled. After all, where the fuck did he go? Jim and the two officers had no choice but to walk the dirt tunnel. The cops took one look and were like, absolutely not. Jim insisted, and so they made him walk to point. They made it about halfway through the tunnel before the cops said finally, no. You're leaving with us, and we're going to review more footage from the restaurant where there are no spiders. Jim got the okay from them to board up both ends of the tunnel, which we did, solidly. And thus the story ends. The pictures got spread widely, but we got no useful leads despite the decent face shot. Did he indeed crawl out a hatch in the busy kitchen and stroll out past the cooks, leaving no trace of mud? I guess he did. We got no suspicious smells coming from out of the tunnel in the later weeks and months, but again, nobody has walked that far side since. We only unboarded the tunnel last week from the split water main shenanigans, and I vowed I will use his skull in this year's Halloween display if he's dead down there.
My cousin Ethan and I grew up together, but I never liked him very much. His family was rich, so he always had the best stuff. Mine wasn't, and I didn't. On Halloween 1985, we were going trick-or-treating together. I was the Terminator and he was Freddy Krueger. His mask cost almost $100 and looked exactly like Freddy's face. The scars, the sneer. Everything was just right. I didn't have a mask. My parents couldn't afford one. I had torn aluminum foil taped to the side of my face. It was meant to look like the Terminator after some of his skin had been ripped off. A few splotches of ketchup on the foil were supposed to look like blood. As soon as it dried, it looked very little like dried blood, and very much more like dried ketchup. Despite my terrible costume, I was still excited to trick-or-treat. We didn't have candy very often at home, except maybe on Easter. My parents encouraged me to go to as many houses as I wanted to get all the candy that I'd be able to eat. It felt good to know they wanted me to be happy. Ethan and I went out after sundown and visited house after house. Every time, the homeowners would gush over Ethan's mask. They'd tell him how scary it was and how realistic. Then they'd turn to me and ask who I was supposed to be. I'd answer, then they'd say something like, "Oh, of course you are. How could I have missed it?" I could tell they felt sorry for me. One even handed me an extra few pieces of candy. When we were done, our pillowcases stuffed with treats of every sort, we began the long walk home. As we went, Ethan rooted around in his bag of loot. I could hear him grumbling and complaining through his mask. Then he started throwing candy on the street, stuff he didn't like. "Go ahead and pick it up if you want, Bill," he called out, heaving handful after handful into the gutter. "I know you can't afford to let anything go to waste." I didn't say anything, but I reached into my pocket and pulled out the lighter and one of the 2 cigarettes I'd stolen from my dad. I'd been smoking on and off the last few months, and even at 13, I knew it was bad for me. I just didn't care. It made me feel good. I stayed a few steps away from Ethan as he tossed more candy away, and as much as I hated myself for it, I ended up picking up a few pieces off the ground and putting them in my bag. Ethan caught me once and laughed. "You're going to be as fat as your mom if you eat all that." I kept my mouth shut. "Is that why she got fired from the restaurant? Did she eat a customer's food?" I knew Ethan was joking. He did it often. I'm sure in his mind he thought he was being harmless and playful. Still, I told him more than a few times to leave my mom out of the jokes. She had diabetes, and she hadn't mentioned it to anyone other than my dad and me, but the doctor told me that she might end up losing her foot. That's why the restaurant let her go. She couldn't walk around and wait tables anymore. "Change the subject, Ethan," I said, and I knew he heard me. And he didn't talk for another minute or so until he did again. "You think her and your dad still fuck? I wonder how he manages to get it in there." He cackled, then insisted. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm done. Promise." I seethed as we took a shortcut through the elementary school soccer field. "Let's stop here a minute," Ethan said. We'd gotten to the school's playground. "I bet I could scare the shit out of some kids if they come by." He sat on one of the swings with his pillowcase on his lap. He kicked his legs and the swing moved back and forth. I stood there, hating him. "I think I see some kids coming over the hill," I told Ethan. "I'm gonna hide behind the slide and sneak up on them if they come over to you." "Go for it," Ethan told me, his voice deep and distorted through the mask. I left Ethan on the swing set and walked over to the slide. I watched him swing as his hateful words rang in my ears. Tears came to my eyes as I remembered Mom smiling from her spot on the couch as she encouraged me to go out and have fun. She was such a good person. So good. She'd never said anything negative about Ethan. In fact, she'd always complimented him on his grades and his wins in basketball and even his looks. "You're going to be a handsome man, Ethan," she told him. "I bet we'll see your face in a magazine someday." Even after her kindness, Ethan still felt it was okay to trash her. I heard him laughing to himself from across the playground. I didn't know why, exactly, but I had a pretty good idea. I reached into my jacket for the other cigarette, knowing the smoke would calm me down. But it had come apart. My pocket was full of loose tobacco and paper. Loose tobacco, paper, and a lighter. Ethan was still laughing as I fingered the lighter in my pocket for a second, then pulled it out. I walked up behind him, and he didn't know I was there as he shouted out, "Okay, one more thing and I'll never say anything about her again. But unless your dad's got a big dick, he'll never manage to..." I flicked the lighter near the back of Ethan's neck, right where his hair and mask met. The hair went up quickly, using his hairspray as an accelerant. Then something happened that I did not expect. The mask burst into flames. Ethan jumped up off the swing and ran into a loose circle, trying to pull the mask off his head. I saw it ripping under his fingers. He couldn't get a grip. The material bubbled, his screams barely muffled as the molten chemicals clung to his skin, echoed off of the brick walls of the elementary school. After a few seconds, he fell and rolled around on the playground, pushing his head into the sand to put out the fire. And he succeeded. But the damage was done. He turned over on his back, no longer screaming, but gasping in shallow, hyperventilating breaths. In the moonlight, I saw the mask was completely fused to what remained of his skin. One of his eyes had apparently burst, but his other darted around almost like he was confused and wondering where he was. I saw something moving on the other side of the field. Kids were coming. I yelled to them to call an ambulance and I waited, unsure of how I felt, until the paramedics got there. I took complete responsibility for setting Ethan on fire. I said I'd been sneaking up to scare him by flicking the lighter near his face. And yes, I got in a lot of trouble. But everyone believed that it was an accident. Ethan's face was destroyed. He had skin grafts and bone grafts and all sorts of reconstructive surgery. He never recovered. Not physically and not emotionally. He killed himself in 1990. His parents held a very expensive funeral. I was invited. They'd forgiven me for my part in his accident years before. In fact, their subsequent lawsuit against the mask company is the reason why Halloween masks are now made of flame-retardant materials. Mom died a few years before Ethan, but not before complications from her diabetes took her left leg. Dad and I were there in the hospital at the same time Ethan's parents were there to see him through yet another round of reconstructive surgery. They visited Mom, Dad, and I while Ethan was still under, recovering after a successful set of grafts. We chatted for a little while about Mom's hopes for recovery, and then the topic moved to Ethan. Ethan's mom was gushing about a plastic surgeon that had recently joined the hospital after working in Switzerland. He was the best, apparently. He'd taken on Ethan's case earlier in the year, albeit remotely, and wrote a substantial article about the new techniques he'd been employing. In the world of plastic surgery, it made a big splash, if only for its ambition. Ethan's mom reached into her purse and pulled out the publication. She flipped it open to the page that showed various photographs of Ethan's burns and the notes and explanations the surgeon had written to accompany the article. I could tell Mom was holding back tears. I knew why, too. Her eyes met mine, and she couldn't hold back any longer. She began to weep. Dad and Ethan's mother held her while she cried, and I just watched. Mom was thinking that she'd been right all those years ago. She'd been right for all the wrong reasons, but right nonetheless. Just like she predicted. Ethan's face had finally made it in to a magazine.
I'm currently stuck at home in quarantine, so I figured I'd write out this story from a few years ago. Sorry for the length. It was a cool October night. My friends and I were at a Halloween party, hanging out and having some drinks. A childhood friend of mine, we'll call him Jeremy, was there with us. Jeremy had a rough childhood and ended up joining a gang when we were teenagers. He tells me he's a product of his own environment. He had been released for jail on this story's year. When he's around us, he's a total goofball, always near the food at parties. You never find this guy without some sort of food or dessert. When we had enough of the party, our group decided we'd go get tacos at a local restaurant. I had honestly forgotten this restaurant was on the bad side of town where I was raised. And, well, this plays a big part in the story. My car, which had myself and my friends, Jenny and Brianna, in it, arrived first. Brianna drove my car since both Jenny and I were buzzed, and she was the only one who didn't drink. We got into the restaurant and ordered our tacos and made our way towards an empty booth. A few minutes later, the guys arrived. It was Brandon, who had a broken leg, Garrett, who's the all-talk kind of guy, Salvador, who's the typical tough guy, and Jeremy, the aforementioned gang member. On one side of the booth there was Brandon and Jenny, to my left, and Brianna to my right. In front of me was Garrett. For some reason, Jeremy was upset, and Salvador was trying to convince him to take off. With that, Salvador tells me they'd be right back, and they leave. I overhear Brandon tell Jenny something, and I ask him, "What's up?" To which he responds, "Nah, it's nothing. Don't worry." I then ask Jenny, "What did he just tell you?" And she responds, "The guy's left for a reason. The guy in front of us is a rival gang member." At this point, Brianna asks me what's going on, and I respond, nothing, trying not to spook her. She was from the nicer side of town and wasn't raised around these situations. I looked up and saw the booth behind Garrett had a bald man in his 30s sitting with 3 other girls. He constantly eyed us while we ate, but didn't say a word. About 15 minutes later, Jeremy and Salvador came back and sat down next to Garrett. Jeremy was visibly upset. He had this animalistic look on his face. No matter what I said to distract him, you could tell nothing was registering with him. Salvador had his chain necklace wrapped around his knuckles. He and Jeremy were talking back and forth. Jeremy says, "I'ma do it now." Salvador said, "Nah, wait for it. Wait for him to do something." Jeremy says back to him, "No, I don't want to give him the advantage." Salvador, even louder, "He's alone. He's not gonna do shit." Brianna is now asking me, what's happening? Why is Jeremy angry? Why did Salvador wrap his chain on his knuckles? My mind is racing, trying to focus on listening to the boys, waiting for my move to get my girlfriends out. The girls sitting with the rival were now telling him to calm down. "Brianna, shush!" I said, trying to listen. And in an instant, the rival gets up yelling, "Screw this!" and runs out the back door. Mere seconds later, Jeremy runs out the front door, Salvador in tail, Garrett right behind him. "Jenny, go!" I yelled as I pushed Jenny. We both shoved Brandon and Jenny ran off towards the front entrance. "Wait!" I yelled as I ran after her, trying not to slip in my high-heeled boots. "Don't go!" I hear Brandon yell as I chase Jenny. Everything was in slow motion. I reached the front entrance, ran to the parking lot, and I see the rival being held back by Garrett and a stranger. He's yelling, "I'm gonna kill you!" Across from him, to my right, I see Jeremy being held back by Salvador and some other stranger. Salvador's yelling at him to calm down, and somehow Brandon made it there in crutches in hand. Jenny's about 10 feet away from them, centered, and she's looking back and forth trying to figure out what to do. I looked back at the rival, and his hand shines. He's holding a knife. I'm now yelling, "Jenny, get away!" thinking if he turns, she's close enough for him to stab. Everyone's yelling. The scene was chaos, and suddenly, the rival gets loose and runs at Jeremy, knife in hand. In that moment, my childhood with him flashed before my eyes. Our playground games, Naruto runs, literally everything flashed, and I screamed, "Jeremy, no!" By some miracle, the knife didn't connect. I ran to Jenny and pulled her further away. Everything was a blur, and now Jeremy was running towards the road, Brandon, crutches and all, limping behind him. Garrett's running, and Salvador was the last to go. Salvador made sure the guys got all the way across the 6-lane road, and he ran back to us girls saying, "Get out of here, now!" The rival sees him and gives chase towards him. "Salvador, run!" I yelled, and he instantly takes off, following after the guys. The rival stops at the sidewalk, feet away from us, and yells, "I'm gonna kill him!" And Jenny says, "No!" He looked at us with a confused expression, and his sisters came to get him, yelling at us, "It's all your friend's fault my brother almost killed him." Brianna showed up out of nowhere, saying, "We have to go." I said, "Wait," since the rival's still walking past my car. I didn't want him to see what car we were getting into. As soon as he passed it, we ran. Brianna struggled with my keys, and I yelled, "I'll drive." My goal was to get the boys, pick up Jeremy, and get him far away from this guy. "No, I got it," she yelled back as she opened the car, and with that, we took off. She made an abrupt U-turn and headed in the direction of the guys. We found them about 5 minutes away, and Jeremy rejected our ride. He was too angry. Instead, Brandon got in. Crutches aren't meant for gang fights or running for that matter. The rest of the guys kept walking. Brandon had asked how we were and commented on Brianna's shaking. She said she was cold, and we responded we were fine, but more worried about Jeremy. After 15 minutes later, we found the guys a mile away. We parked and hugged it out, just thankful everyone was okay. Apparently, upon entering the taco restaurant, the rival had confronted Jeremy over what gang he was from, which set off the whole altercation later on. For some reason, the rival sisters either didn't see this or decided to blame Jeremy anyways. Jeremy explained the rival had the knife to his throat, but he was much too of a bitch to kill him. Whatever his reason was for not doing so, I'm grateful. Jeremy's still here, thanks to that.
One Halloween Eve. It was about 2006, and one night before Halloween. My family was having a huge party that night, and the house was, I kid you not, littered with drunk adults in costumes. But that's not where the creepiness lies. The creepiness happened outside the house, within the dark shadows of my neighborhood. It was late, and everybody was partying, except for, of course, my older sister and I. My sister had some friends over, and we were all goofing around online. Remember Omegle? Yep, that's where we spent most of our time. Bored of being dumb online, we all decided to venture out down the block to the nearest 7-Eleven for some ice cream and soda, which we had run out of at the house. Being conniving, we got our drunk family to allow us to walk down the street. For many reasons, that wasn't a good idea. We were all dressed up in our costumes, laughing our way down the blackened streets. It was completely dark and empty out, save for the shine of the moon. A few minutes into our walk, we noticed the street in front of us being lit up by beams of headlights. A car was approaching, and it was approaching really slow. We giggled it off, joking that it was a creep. Why joke about something true, though? Suddenly, the car had made a sharp turn. It was coming straight for us. Our widened eyes lit up in the high beams. We all took off running. Without thinking twice, we went as fast as we could and dove into some nearby bushes, trying hard to quiet our breathing. Through the bushes, we could see the slowly approaching lights of the car again. This time, we heard male voices coming from inside of the vehicle. Those windows were rolled down. Fuck, where'd they go? They were right here! Turn around, idiot! Keep looking! The car turned back around, slowly creeping its way back down the street. We stayed hiding for what felt like forever before finally deciding to run back home, ditching the ice cream and soda plan. Miraculously, we all made it home in one piece, and booked it back downstairs to the den, far away from any cars. They were probably just a group of guys trying to spook some kids, but the fact that we could have been abducted on that Halloween Eve still stirs in me. I feel like the luckiest, dumbest kid ever. And I thought Omegle was scary.
I feel I should preface this story with a statement that I'm usually a skeptic when it comes to paranormal stories, albeit an open-minded one. I'd never had an experience I would truly say was paranormal until this one. I've searched for hours on Google, attempting to find a similar story from someone else, and have had no luck. What really stands out for me is that there's an energy or feeling that accompanies the experience, and even remembering it still gives me this feeling and goosebumps. This is not something I normally experience, and most people that know me would probably be surprised that I would be spooked by much of anything. I am a veteran, and I've spent years since leaving the military working in emergency rooms, specialized security, and doing other high adrenaline jobs, and I am not prone to being creeped out. I'm hoping to find someone else who may have had a similar experience, as I feel oddly compelled to relate to someone about this. With that, here goes. A couple of months ago, I was driving with my wife down a rural highway in Oregon, returning home from a road trip to Crater Lake. We live on the coast, and the highway we were taking to get back is very curvy as it winds through the Cascade Mountain Range. It was dark as ink and probably about 11 p.m. We were driving along, and I was just watching the road, going about 45 miles per hour. We round a bend which makes me slow down to about 45, and just as we get around it, my wife suddenly says, "Look out, there's a person there." It takes me a second for some reason as I let off the gas. Then I notice it. Crouched near the side of this 2-lane highway, on my left side, is a person wearing what looks like gray baggy sweats or clothes and a reflective vest. This is an easy 20 miles either direction for civilization and is heavily wooded. Think Oregon coast forest. I begin braking, and instantly the figure stands up, faces us, and begins jogging directly to the car. It felt like electricity in the air as when she faced us. Her head was flopped to the side, like her neck was totally limp, and her mouth was wide open. She appeared to have gray hair, and her arms and hands were held up to her chest, her wrists curled. Her legs didn't seem to be working right either as she hobbled at us. Think like severe progressed MS. Then it hit, this primal-like feeling of dread, like my subconscious knew something wasn't right. I couldn't fully focus on her as the car was still moving, and I had to steer, but my wife was looking right at her. My first thought normally would have been to hit the brakes and see what was going on, as once again this is literally miles and miles from town. But there was just this dread feeling in the air, and time almost seemed to slow down. At that moment, I hear my wife say, "Don't stop, just go." Instinctively, I accelerated. As we sped up, this lady was jogging right at us, and must have come within a foot of running into the side of our car as we went past her. We rounded the next bend, and I looked at my wife and just said, "What the hell was that? I should turn around. Who the hell jogs out here? What was wrong with her neck?" My wife just looks at me and says, "No, don't go back. I don't know what that was." I told her I couldn't look directly at her for long as I was focused on the road, but I described what I saw, and she confirmed she saw the same. She said when she came up to the side of the car, she was staring right at us, and my wife looked into her eyes, but she didn't have any pupils, and her expression was frozen with her mouth open. We scoured news stories, and I even contacted authorities. They advised no one was reported missing or heard out there. I still get this strange, intense, electrified feeling anytime I think about her, as does my wife. Anytime I talk about her, I'm compelled to refer to that person as it. All I know is it wasn't right. We have now coined her the floppy-headed jogger. Has anyone else experienced something like this?
In 2014, my family and I moved into an old house in Iowa City, Iowa. It was a really nice house with 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a kitchen, and even a dumbwaiter. For those of you who don't know what a dumbwaiter is, it's basically a small elevator that's commonly used in older houses. In this case, the house we had moved to was one of them. In my family were my parents, my younger brother, and obviously myself. My dad had worked as a lawyer at the time, which is the reason why we moved, because of better pay. Anyway, fast forward to the day of Halloween. My parents had told us kids that they had been invited to a coworker's Halloween party. Seeing as they wouldn't be back until late, they had asked me to take my little brother trick-or-treating while they were gone. Not wanting to disappoint my little brother, I agreed and told him that we'd only go to houses that were inside the neighborhood. Even though I was 16, I was never into trick-or-treating even when I was younger. I've maybe done it once or twice and thought of it as boring and overhyped. Call me a hater or whatever, that's just how I was when I was a kid. Anyway, we hit a few houses down our block and proceeded to head over to the wealthier side of town. These were the types of people that were substantially more generous in giving out candy to trick-or-treaters. That being said, my brother was intrigued and proceeded to grab my hand to go. By the time we hit two of the wealthier homes, it was already past 10, which is usually around the time where people stop giving out candy. I tell my brother that it's time to go, and right as we're about to leave, I notice a house with very detailed decorations. Like I said, Halloween was never my thing, but there was something about these decorations that caught my eye. I decide that we can check out one last house, and my brother and I head over to it. On the front patio was a prop of a man laying face down that had been crushed by a metal safe, as if it were dropped on him. Fake blood was splattered all around the yard from this prop, and was a pretty good Halloween decoration that would make anybody think twice. Suddenly, a middle-aged man stepped out with a smile and apologized for the decoration. He proceeds to give my brother the rest of the candy he had and told us to have a nice night. As we were walking away, I noticed he kept staring at us as we walked along. I turned around a few more times to look until he went back inside his house. After all, this was an area that was a bit sketchy, so it was common to see people like this. The next morning, I wake up to the sound of police sirens coming from a few houses down. As soon as I wake up, I put on my slides and go outside to see what all the commotion was about. People stood outside their houses as the whole scene unfolded. As the story goes, the guy with the realistic Halloween decorations wasn't too far off. Those so-called props in front of his yard were real bodies. Apparently, 2 men in the area had been reported missing, and it wasn't until then when they were identified. The owner was sentenced to life in prison and even had his house torn down a month later. Knowing that a murder has taken place in the neighborhood, we moved out soon after and now live in a much better area. I knew from the start that there was something off about those decorations. I just ignored my gut.
I recently moved into a big house, just temporarily. It's kind of a complicated situation. The house belongs to a family member. They were going to be gone for a few months, that sort of thing. I was going to be there on my own, so obviously I thought, what if this house is haunted? There wasn't anything in the house when I moved in, but there is now. I was in the main hallway unpacking some stuff when the doorbell rang. That put me on edge right away, because the house is at the end of a long driveway, and kind of out of the way. You have to go looking for it. There was an old woman at the door. This was in broad daylight, but there was still something kind of off about her. She was really tall, like a full head taller than me, and there was something weird about the way she looked. It was like none of her clothes fit her properly. She shook my hand and smiled, really wide, and told me that she was from the neighborhood council, or something like that, and asked if she could come in and talk to me. My gut reaction was to say no, but I couldn't really think of a reason to. She was just an old woman. What was she going to do? I really wish I had just slammed the door in her face. I brought her into the living room, and she sort of tottered behind me, like her feet didn't fit into her shoes properly. She sat down without asking, and grinned at me until I took a seat across from her. For about half a minute, she didn't say anything. She just smiled and stared at me while it got increasingly awkward. Just as I was about to break the silence, she fished in her pocket and pulled out this really big old-fashioned sweet, the type that comes in see-through wrapping. "Here," she said, "eat this." I should probably point out here that she spoke really quietly, so it was difficult to hear anything she said. I accepted the sweet, kind of taken back, and unwrapped it. It was dark red, almost black. I popped it into my mouth because she was still grinning at me and nodding her head. Have you ever walked around behind a supermarket where they keep the big bins? They throw meat that's gone bad into those bins. Imagine that rancid smell, but on a hot summer day. It's so thick you can almost feel it in the air. That's what this sweet tasted like. I almost spit it out onto the floor, but social niceties made me chew the thing and force it down my throat. The woman was talking, but between the taste and her quiet voice, I barely heard her. My mouth tasted like rotten meat, so I politely told her I was going to go get some water and walked quickly into the kitchen. When I came back, she was gone. I had been in the kitchen for less than 30 seconds. My first reaction probably should have been to assume that she went to the bathroom or had to leave in a hurry. Instead, I searched the entire house. I went through every single room, convinced I was going to open a closet or look under a bed and see her stuffed in there, grinning at me. That didn't happen, obviously, but I was still extremely on edge as the sun started to go down. I felt like I was turning off the light in my bedroom after spotting a giant spider in there. That night, I propped a chair against my bedroom door because I just couldn't shake the feeling that the woman was still in the house somewhere, hiding. I woke up at around 2 in the morning and heard creaking floorboards downstairs. It was an old house and unfamiliar. I kept telling myself that until the noises stopped. When I woke up the next morning, there was a red sweet on the living room table. I'll tell you the same thing I told the police. No, I couldn't be absolutely certain that the sweet wasn't there the day before. Maybe I had just overlooked it, but I didn't think so. They told me that the organization the woman claimed to come from didn't actually exist, and clearly thought that I was wasting their time. After they left, I searched the entire house again, and the grounds, and then I searched them again. By the time I was finished, I had managed to calm down a bit and looked at the situation rationally. The woman probably left the suite there the previous day, and I just didn't notice. I had searched the whole house twice now. There was nowhere she could possibly be hiding. She was probably just some doddery old lady who wandered off while I was in the kitchen. As I prepared to go to bed, I had managed to fully delude myself into thinking nothing strange was going on. I decided not to do anything childish like blocking my door, because what was I afraid of? Even if she somehow was still inside the house somewhere, what was she going to do? At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up abruptly, knowing in the back of my mind that something was wrong. I guess I must have heard something in my sleep. I turned over onto my side and reached out to turn on the bedside lamp, groping around because I was in an unfamiliar room. When the light came on, I saw the old woman standing right next to my bed. I only got a glimpse of her because as soon as I screamed, she scuttled backward out the door really fast. I only got the briefest glimpse of her before she vanished into the unlit hallway outside my door. I now believe that the human brain has a special compartment for dealing with experiences far outside the realm of the natural. If I had woken up to find a burglar in my room, I probably would have gone numb with panic. If there was a lion at the foot of my bed, I would have been too paralyzed with fear to do anything. But as soon as the woman disappeared, that special compartment took over. I jumped out of bed and slammed the door shut, and then shoved a chair up against the handle. Then I dashed for my phone. No signal, no internet. I later found out there was nothing wrong with the phone or the local service. I think somehow the woman interfered with it. The drop from the bedroom window wasn't too high. If I landed just right, I would probably avoid injury. But what if I sprained an ankle or broke my leg? I had a sudden vision of pulling myself across the dark garden while the woman sprinted after me, and I decided I didn't want to risk it. That gave me two options: wait out the night in my bedroom, or try to get out of the house now. I went for the second one. I was thinking that my flimsy barricade wouldn't hold if the woman decided that she wanted back in. I broke one of the chair legs off and crept slowly into the hallway, reaching carefully for the light switch. When I pressed it, the lights came on for a second and then faded out. I flicked the switch a few more times. Nothing. Some gut instinct told me she was sabotaging them somehow. I used my phone for light as I slowly, quietly crept along the upstairs hallway and down the stairs. The light barely traced the shape of the walls and the dark, yawning frames of open doorways. I jumped at every single shadow and unidentifiable shape, certain that any second the grinning face would appear out of the shadows. I got downstairs into the front door. I had double locked it and put the chain in place. Just as I was reaching for the first lock, I heard rapid, uneven footsteps at the top of the stairs, approaching swiftly. I undid the first lock. A high-pitched shriek came from halfway down the stairs, and I screamed as I undid the second lock and wrenched the door open. It stuck fast. I had forgotten the chain. I glanced behind me and saw the tall, spindly shape of the woman half running, half falling down the stairs toward me, her head lolling backward and her mouth hanging open. I can't even remember getting the chain off. I might actually have just yanked the door open so hard that I broke it. In any case, the last that I saw of the woman was her face inches away from me as I slammed the door shut. I sprinted to the nearest house, and eventually they called the police, possibly because I was half delirious with fear and babbling incoherently. The police once again failed to find anything unusual. It's been a week. I'm staying at a friend's place, sleeping with the lights on and the bedroom door barricaded. The house's real owners aren't back yet. I'm not sure what I'm going to tell them, but I have to stop them from going back there, somehow. This isn't a haunting, it's an infestation. I can't stop thinking about all of the holes in our defenses, the windows and doors left open, the strangers invited into our living room. I just hope to God it's the house that she wanted, and not me.
I don't know if you can tell this one on an online store or YouTube or not. It's not really for kids. It's a true story. I won't say exactly where it was or use actual names. This happened around 2004 or 2005. I was in college and lived with my much older boyfriend in a 4-room apartment complex. It had 2 shared bathrooms, one between each 2 rooms. It had one shared kitchen in the middle of each building. It was the cheapest place in a college town to live in. Cars were broken into and slumlord management, etc. I think we paid $450 a month for that room back then. For the northern part of the West Coast, it was pretty cheap. Typical tweaker town, poverty, no jobs, etc. There was this peculiar lady who lived in the bedroom catty corner to us, and I guess she was maybe around 55, but she could have been 70. I don't know exactly how old she was, but her Beatle posters clued me into her generation. She just would never say her age. Anyway, she was on disability and basically laid in bed all day, surrounded by dusty old knickknacks and watched old movies, like black and white movies. She was sick with some kind of stomach thing, had headaches and mental issues as well. My boyfriend helped her with a few things, and she ended up talking to me a few times as well, all about her sad life. He wasn't the greatest guy, told me he talked her into giving him a pain pill, so she must have been pretty sick. But then again, pain pills were common in the early 2000s. specialists prescribed by doctors who felt sorry for people in any type of pain. I never heard an actual name, disease, or condition. She told us about the adult daughter she never saw, and her parents she hated, but paid her rent. So anyways, months passed, and I one day noticed the windshield on her car was smashed. A day later, she was giving things away by setting them near her car with the free sign. When I asked her, she seemed ambivalent to the broken windshield. I was pretty ambivalent to her because she tended to talk long and sort of trap you in a kind of conversation. Needless to say, I began avoiding her. I never saw her in the kitchen. She mostly just bought liters of soda and donuts, Twinkies, which she had lying around her room. Super skinny too, even though all she ate was junk food. Definitely malnourished. So Halloween night was coming up very close, and on a big party night, I was drinking a shot of vodka in the kitchen before a party when she came into the shared kitchen and began asking me if she could have a shot. I obliged. My boyfriend was a lightweight and I'd already passed out from 2, so he was useless. Otherwise, I'd left him with her to talk with her or whatever. She was an older lady, and at the time, I trusted that someone older knew how to handle their alcohol. I had no reason not to share on that holiday. I was jolly and excited to go out. After a few shots together, I went to leave. She asked if she could come along with me. I was 19 at the time and looking to hook up with some of my friends. I'm thinking in the back of my mind that this older lady would not be fun to babysit. Plus, she's just in a nightgown. One of those old-fashioned nightgowns, like a little rich girl in a white lace. She acted odd. Not just drunk, but also believed she was my peer. And I really didn't understand why. I just wanted to go alone. I was kind of irritated by her and just wanted to leave. This was a big mistake. And this is the part that I regret. I left her. I gave her the rest of the bottle as I felt kind of bad. I made up an excuse that I can't recall and just left in a hurry. The party was okay. I crashed when I got home around 3 to 4 a.m. About 4 days after Halloween, neither my boyfriend nor I had seen her. One day, I pulled up from work. An ambulance and a hazmat truck was in front of our apartments. It turned out the poor woman had taken an entire bottle of pain pills and drank that entire bottle that I'd left her. She then locked herself in the room. At the last minute, she tried to crawl to the door and get out. Was trying to vomit up the pills. She died up against that door. The EMTs had to yank the inner door off from the inside of the kitchen because she was stuck up against it. She was gone when I came in. There were stains on the kitchen floor from her being removed. Like stains that smelled and were obviously bodily fluid. I cleaned it up the best I could with bleach, as I felt responsible for it all. The moment I was mopping, her super elderly parents showed up. They didn't say a word to me, but the look they gave me was nothing less than pure hatred. Like it was all my fault that she lived in this crappy apartment. Or maybe they thought I was white trash, as the woman told me all the time she was from a rich family. They went into her room and closed the door. I felt bad, and still will for a long time. Regardless of how physically and mentally ill she was, I wish I'd never given her that vodka. I didn't know anything at the time about adult protective services or reporting self-neglect of disabled folks back then. From now on, I pay special attention to individuals in that kind of state and try to help when I can. I had no idea giving your stuff away and acting manic were weird at that age. Anyway, if anyone acts odd, just call the cops for a welfare check. I wish I would have done it. It would have saved her life. For as long as I could have, at least. This story is 100% true, even though most people I tell this to in real life still don't believe me. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and just watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times. I would stay up later than anyone else just because I could. Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept toward the bay windows in my living room and peeked out onto the porch. Sitting on my front porch was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood and holding this huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately, ran screaming into my parents' room. was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I was finally able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry, told me it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused. I kept crying and screaming until he had enough, snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door. To prove that there was nothing out there, I kicked and screamed all the while trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open and said, "See, there's nothing, there's..." And to this day, I've never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at both of us, and then slowly stood up with a knife. My dad slammed the door shut. I got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. We went back to the door with the 12 gauge, cracked the door open enough to stick the barrel out, and asked her what she was doing. He said that she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her the police were coming. She freaked out, grabbed the knife and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later, trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. I never slept in the living room again.